What are you supposed to do about the fact that there are hundreds of board games released every year and you can't play all of them? Well, you ignore some, right? Most of them. And you pick based on some arbitrary thing, the artwork, the theme, the description, and you just decide, I'm not going to play that board game, I'm going to focus on these ones. But sometimes you miss something really good. And it's happened to me as well. So today I'm going to talk about 3 board games that I think you probably overlooked, including one that I definitely did, and tell you about why I think they're worth giving a chance. If you're new to the channel, then please subscribe to get more board game recommendations, and don't overlook that notification bell. Right, let's get to the first game. As a reviewer, I've built up defenses to keep out bad games. I've got a wall for Kickstarter games, another for miniatures. But the last obstacle a game must face is my personal bodyguard, who is trained to kill when he hears the word fantasy. And the poor guy is seriously overworked. But some games are so good that they get through anyway. After 3 years of mild onslaught, I finally played Fantasy Realms. And I needn't have worried, it contains nothing resembling fantasy. It is a brilliant card game that could and should be about anything else. What it's really about is creating the perfect hand of cards. You start with 7 cards that don't go together, and you end with 7 cards that hopefully complement each other so well that you score 300 points. The cards all have their own specific demands. Imagine you're trying to host the perfect dinner party. If you invite Roger, you can't invite Nigel because they hate each other. But you want Nigel there because he'll get along really well with Terry, except Terry isn't going to be any fun without his wife Marion, so you invite her, but now you can't serve the chicken you've already bought, and so on. That's exactly how Fantasy Realms feels. Getting a new card, such as the King, helps you score another card, but now he wants something else. And you're trying to find a harmonious balance that always feels just outside your grasp as the game hurries to its end. But rather than feeling hampered by problems, it's surprisingly positive. Almost all the cards give you more points. The challenge is in finding the really lucrative combinations. Finding the Monica and Chandler pairings, not the Rachel and Joeys. Each turn, you take a card and then discard one. You can take a fresh card from the deck or from any previously discarded card out on the table. It's nice to be able to see what's available so you can give up on one strategy and switch to another. I love that some cards encourage you to take bigger risks. Candle gives you 100 points, but only if you get Book of Changes and Bell Tower. What if they never come out of the deck? It's always fun shooting for the moon. And in Fantasy Realms, there's more than one moon to aim for. Desperately seeking a card can cause you trouble because every time you take from the deck, you get closer to the end. Once there are 10 cards in the discard area, the game ends. And if you wasted that time hoping for a card that never arrives, you're gonna lose. Life is what happens when you're making other plans. Its beauty is in its simplicity. I never quite got that from listening to other reviews. I think my fantasy bodyguard was screaming in my ear. Fantasy the genre. My fantasy bodyguard is Sir Jorah Mormont. I had assumed the card text would be complicated and that wrapping my head around it all would be a chore, but it's fine. And we didn't even ever have to go back to the rulebook, which is a rare and treasured thing these days. In fact, the most complicated aspect of the game is counting up the points. But for a relatively solitary game, you want to show off what you've collected. And there's a WizKids app which makes it a lot easier. With the right theme and art, I think this game could have been even bigger. Very few games are this simple and this satisfying. It could be about organising a party, or trying to get the best foods that go together at a buffet, or literally anything else except the one theme they went for. But at the end of the day, in the war of gameplay versus art, gameplay will always win. Better to be ugly and fun than pretty and boring. Quick disclaimer, I have done paid video work for Pegasus, the publisher behind the next game, for their YouTube channel. I tried to keep that work separate from ActualLOL, but I wanted to declare it anyway. I've never been paid by anyone to make a video on ActualLOL in 6 years, and no one, not even my mum, has input into which games I cover or what I say about them. Let's carry on. Let's not beat around the bush. My farm shop looks like a mobile game that you wouldn't play. One that pops up to advertise to you while you're playing a mobile game that you would play. I don't think it looks bad. It's not bad artwork. I've just evolved to distrust it. Those shiny images and smiley faces feel like they're hiding gameplay designed by evil psychologists to make it as addictive as possible. But it's actually designed by Rudiger Dorn, the man behind Las Vegas, one of the best games of all time. So I had to try it. In case the premise of this video is still unclear, I'm glad I did. In my farm shop, you own a farm, and every time the dice are rolled, it activates one of your fields. So if I roll a 10, I get an egg, and if I roll a 5, I get some honey. It's a system borrowed from Catan and later resurrected by Machi Koro and Space Base, but my farm shop is the best take on it yet. The produce goes into my farm shop, and now I need to sell it to get money to prove to my father's ghost that I'm capable of running a farm. They're not explicit about that detail in the rulebook, but you've only got to look at the woman's sad eyes to fill in the blanks. And selling your produce is not a foregone conclusion in this game. You also have to roll the right number to make a sale. Now, if you've never played Catan, rolling 2 dice is a troublesome affair. Those 2 dice absolutely love the number 7, obsessed with it they are. And they're not half partial to a 6 or an 8, but they hate rolling the 2s, the 11s and 12s, to the point that you'd think they're incapable of doing it. Like a child who won't make the bed. You've seen it happen. You know it's possible. But don't hold your breath. The point is, if you can only sell produce when the dice rolls 11, you're not going to be selling very often. Thankfully, that little genius Rudiger Dorn has got you covered. Catan, Space Base, Machi Koro, they all use 2 dice, like a bunch of chumps. My farm shop gives you 50% more dice to roll. 3 dice. Cutting straight into the profit margin of the game. The publisher was like, we can't do it, it will bankrupt us. And Rudiger said, give me 3 dice or I walk. And, well, the rest is history. 3 dice means you can choose which 2 dice to pair up, so you have options over which field to activate. Simple. No, it's not simple, because the other die is used to choose one of 6 upgrades to your farm. Every turn you get a new card to improve a field. And as the game goes on, they get more powerful. When you take it, you can put it on any field, remembering that some numbers get rolled more than others. Do you want eggs more often, or do you want the opportunity to sell more often? The truth is, you don't know. This is exactly what your father's ghost was on about. The challenge in my farm shop is balancing stock turnover. There are times when your shop will be bursting with produce and you just can't sell it, to the point that excess goes to waste. And other times, the dice will grant you a rare chance to sell, and you've got nothing to sell. It's a pain that you learn from, and because of the freedom of the game, it never feels like luck. It feels like you've focused too much on one thing or the other. The other players also have their influence, because you activate a field on everyone else's turn as well. So the dice they choose to pair up will help you or hurt you. It means you're always interested in what's going on. Even if they roll a number you don't want, you can alter it by playing a burlap sack. And they become so important later on when you've got a really good field that you want to keep activating. Beyond that, there are sunflowers which you can earn and place on a field to make it produce double. Every little rule is intuitive and adds its own weight to the decisions you make. It's absolutely simple enough to teach to newbies, but there's hidden depth, and it's well hidden underneath a name and some artwork that would make a gamer dismiss it, which is a real shame because it's one of the most engaging games I've played this year. I can completely understand anyone who might have overlooked Fairy Tale Inn because on the face of it, it looks like Disney Connect 4. And that is the least appealing 3-word combo in board games since D-Day Monopoly. It's a 2-player game played in this vertical plastic board in which you drop fairy tale characters into the top of a column and they fall to the bottom. It's as if to destroy Disney Connect 4, it had to become Disney Connect 4. Fairy Tale Inn starts in the same place, but with every new idea, it sprints ahead, leaving Connect 4 on the starting line sucking its thumb. Okay, so the Olympics was on this week. Its first revolution is that when you drop a tile into the grid, it faces you. You sit on either side of the plastic contraption and you can see where your characters are because they're in colour, whereas your opponents are in silhouette. The designers must have taken the afternoon off after coming up with that one. The second revolution is that you're not trying to just connect 4 things in a line. You have many different goals, all in the search of gaining coins. Each character tile you place in your inn scores in its own way. Some will get you coins during the game, such as the princess who gets you a coin for every other princess in a diagonal line, whereas others only score at the end, like Red Riding Hood, who gets you a coin for every one of your characters you manage to place next to her. It gives you loads to consider. Do you place defensively to stop your opponent from scoring big, or focus on your own endeavours? And your options aren't only where to place, but what to place, because each turn you can choose which tile to take. The bottom 2 are free, whereas the others cost you coins. Remember, coins are points, but it can be worth the cost if you can make more from it, or stop your opponent taking it. Tiles join the track at random from the bag, so there's a healthy frustration in the tiles you want not coming up, and you have to think on your feet and find another way to prosper. Some characters are more interesting than others. I particularly like the big bad wolf, which makes each row a battle for having the most wolves. On the other end of the excitement spectrum is Jack, who is always followed by a beanstalk tile, which I just found really boring because he doesn't actually change the scoring. Thankfully, you only play with 5 characters, so you can mix them up each game to create a new dynamic. But the game only comes with 8 characters, which feels really cheap. It's like they found the bare minimum they could include before it would damage the gameplay. Maybe CMON forgot that they weren't running a Kickstarter and left the expansion characters in stretch goal purgatory. And if that makes you angry enough to want to scream into the void, the box can provide the void, because even a light 2-player game needs to fill up half a shelf these days. It's not like we're living in a golden age of board games which are all competing for space or anything. God, it's hard to recommend this game. Maybe you should overlook it. Or just play it in a board game cafe so you don't have to commit. The third revolution, let's get back to that, is making certain grid locations appealing. If you put your tile here, you get a free coin. And it becomes a game of chicken with who is going to take the spot below that, thereby giving that space to the other player. Even better are these mean spaces in the heart of the board that cancel your character's power. Fairy Tail Inn feels like an abstract game, the way you desperately try not to grant your opponent an opening, but with a flourish of luck that keeps it from getting too serious, because you can't plan for everything. It's co-designed by Paolo Mori, who has a great track record with games like Libertalia and Blitzkrieg. I love that he turns his hands at different types of games, and the common thread among them all is how big an experience he gets across with such simple rules. You get the impression that the designers sat down and said, how do we turn Connect 4 into a modern game? And in that respect, it's 100% success. It retains what people would think of, the aesthetics and the spatial puzzle, but its changes are so effective that it makes someone who would only ever play Connect 4 to silence a screaming child want to keep it and play it, despite its oversized box, paltry content, and bland theme. As always, there are links to buy these games below. If you want to know which games you should overlook, I review games that don't make it onto the channel in my Patreon newsletter. Sign up for that at patreon.com/actualol. And if you want more recommendations, subscribe to the channel. Or go back and watch some old videos. Those games are still good. I'm John Perkis, thanks for watching.